lost over the last year to this pandemic. And the security situation, as we've been saying, so tight across the Capitol. I want to bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, for more on this. Ever since that siege 2 weeks ago, Washington on the highest of alerts.
George, we're witnessing the biggest security event perhaps in the history of the country. Over 25,000 National Guard, thousands of law enforcement personnel at the ready. And the reason is that they were shook to their core by that insurrection. Law enforcement officials I've been talking to say they still can't believe the level of people and the amount of people and the anger and the heat that they brought on that Capitol. They were stunned by it. And we got new details yesterday, George, about a conspiracy among some of the members who took over the Capitol, that they talked about trying to trap members of Congress in the tunnels below the Capitol and to, quote, turn on the gas. So law enforcement is reacting in the way that they are because of the horror that they saw a couple weeks ago, George. And quite frankly, today they don't expect to see any kind of numbers like they did a few weeks ago. They are concerned about armed people showing up, perhaps to try something, simply because there's so many people so angry about believing the lie that the election was stolen, George.
Only 2 protests of fewer than 100 people each have been authorized for Washington, D.C. today as we see the helicopters approach. Martha Raddatz, you were out there with the crowds 2 weeks ago. It was a menacing moment, quite different this morning with those 25,000 National Guard troops spread out across Washington.
It is an absolute lockdown, but still, George, when I came in this morning, when all of us came in very early this morning, there is this strong sense of history and how important this day is to the city. Seeing the sunrise over the city was quite incredible, knowing what was going to happen. And watching those helicopters now head for JBA, I am thinking of that letter that David Muir was talking about that President Trump showed him. And one of the things in that letter that he said was, we are just temporary occupants of this office. That makes us guardians of those democratic institutions and traditions like rule of law, separation of powers, equal protection, and civil liberties. Regardless of the push and pull of daily politics, it's up to us to leave those instruments of our democracy at least as strong as we found them. And of course, as we hear those words, we think of what happened 2 weeks ago in the Capitol. In fact, George, I'm sitting here, I see some old notes that talk about treason, bribery, threat to national security, an act of revolt, and M4 rifles. That's where we were 2 weeks ago. That's why we are where we are today with this city in virtual lockdown. But those democratic institutions will go forward.
They held. Our democratic institutions were tested 2 weeks ago. They've been tested over these last 4 years, but they have held. We're told that President Trump did speak for just a couple of minutes before he got on Marine One. Let's listen in.
Mr. President.
President Trump there saying it's been a great honor to serve in the White House. It was a great home. A little wave there from the First Lady as well, as we see Marine One now getting prepared to land at Joint Base Andrews. Interesting, David Muir, that he said maybe it's not the last time you'll see me.
Yeah, that was notable, George. He said hopefully it's not a long-term goodbye. He said over and over again, it was a great honor. A great home as he turned and looked back at the White House, a great honor. If you look at Marine One as it prepares to land there, and this is also steeped in tradition, though it's happening earlier in the day than we typically see it every 4 years. This usually happens after that inaugural moment at the Capitol, and then the incoming president, the outgoing president, gathered to review the troops. Nancy Reagan once said that Ronnie turned and saluted, and they got on Marine One and circled the White House one extra time because Ronald Reagan said, "Look, there's our bungalow." She said that he said that with a lump in his throat. How emotional that trip on Marine One is. I can only imagine what this has been like this morning for Donald Trump and Melania Trump as they now leave. The sun came up in Washington 7:23 this morning, and it was just an hour later they were leaving the White House, and now they land here where the president is expected to speak again, George.
Yeah, he's going to speak. That usually doesn't happen either. Tom Yamas is now there at Joint Base Andrews. Is there more of a crowd there now to hear the president's speech, Tom?
Yeah, George, shortly after we reported our first time, about 100 to 200 Trump supporters filed, and you can see them just behind me. We're seeing a lot of families here. There's a surprising number of children here as well. Also, the first family is here. If I can ask my photographer, Gary, to zoom in just above the crowd's heads right there, you can see the first family here waiting for President Trump and the First Lady as Marine One wheels in right now. We are expecting President Trump to make a short speech, about 15 minutes. We're expecting him to thank a lot of the supporters who are out here, thank the country, but also talk about potentially what he plans on doing in the future. And again, we can't say enough how different this is than anything else we've seen before. 4 years ago at his inauguration speech, one of the first things President Trump said was he thanked the Obamas. He said, quote, "They were magnificent on this day." And we will not see something like that today because the president has decided not to be there for his successor. He has decided not to be there for the country as the transfer of power occurs. Just behind us, like I said, there's about maybe 200 to 300 people in this crowd, but it's not packed. There is empty spaces, and there are people that are lingering around here. Not sure how the president's going to take that. I'm sure he'll be happy that some people came out, and it may be telling George of where his support is right now in the country. I spoke to a lot of Trump supporters last night all across the country to kind of get a gauge of where the support was. And a lot of Trump supporters I spoke to said they were happy with him, but they want to turn the page. They are ready for the next leader in the Republican Party to emerge. It seems the older the Trump supporter I spoke to, the more willing they were to give him a second chance. But a lot of Republicans I spoke to yesterday, George, were ready for the next chapter for the party. They're ready to turn this page and say goodbye to President Trump, George.
Thank you, Tom. John, Carl, the president doesn't often stick to a script, but it does appear that he's been given a more conciliatory script to follow today.
Right, and I've seen that, but I've been given the caveat we always have with Donald Trump. Who knows what he'll actually say, but the plan is to give a conciliatory message here, George. And I just spoke to somebody who spoke with the president late last night, who tells me that he thinks that Donald Trump actually did leave a letter for Joe Biden in the Oval Office. We'll see if that is what actually happened. But what strikes me watching this right now, there you see Ivanka Trump, and looks like Jared Kushner. We haven't seen Donald Trump in public outside of those pre-recorded videos he has released. We haven't seen him in public in 8 days, which by my count is by far the longest stretch of time we have gone without seeing him in public. So it was interesting to see him leave the White House, actually come over, briefly speak to the reporters. Again, words, gracious words, talking about what an honor it had been, and saying he hopes to see people again before long. None of the combat we usually expect from Donald Trump, and we'll see if we see the same tone when he comes out and gives his final remarks as President of the United States.
Haven't seen him, haven't heard much from him ever since he's been banned from Twitter and Facebook as well. It does look like he's getting prepared now to come off of Marine One. Rahm Emanuel, let me bring you in right now as well. You've served in the White House as Chief of Staff, served in Congress as we watch the president get prepared to come. How much difference does it make to the beginning of the presidency of Joe Biden that the traditional rituals are not being followed?
I think it's actually more important to the country than to Joe Biden, in the sense that these are touchstones that all of us look to. I mean, I think about my time in the House of Representatives when you have a change and a speaker gives to the other speaker the gavel. It symbolizes. That's something for us to go through this transition. So for Joe Biden, I don't think it's going to be earth-shattering. It's going to not rattle him. I think for the country's own sense, I look at this moment. We just went through 4 years where our fever was at 103 every day, and the president-elect's entire message is 97.1. And I think missing those rituals will be not great for the country, but I think his message of moving forward together, unity, all the things that he's trying to do, I think is basically sending a message. We're turning the page on this moment, and let's all play a role in taking the temperature back to 97.1.
And in every public appearance in the last week for Joe Biden, it seems like he's trying to do his best to soothe the country.
Without a doubt. I mean, that I think is the entire, and that's where both the right thing to do, because in many ways the election was a referendum on the president, and where the country rejected both the temperament, the tone, and the tenor of this presidency. And so Biden and his own president-elect Biden in his own DNA is about, we can do this. We're all of one country, we're all of one mission and one purpose in that effort. And I think that, to me, is where he both has the greatest opportunity. The attention will be obviously in the agenda with that tone.
President being introduced right now. It looked like he gave a final thank you to his pilots there on Marine One from the First Lady. As well, as we've said, we expect the president to speak for about 15 minutes, some prepared remarks. He put out a videotaped farewell address last night. He is, as John Carlos said, he has not appeared before reporters over the last 8 days, but he is going to speak now here at Andrews. Tom Yamas, he wanted a military flourish. We're hearing the military band.
Yeah, that's right. He wanted the 21-gun salute. We're hearing this cannons firing off right now. There was supposed to also be a flyover, the reports of a flyover. That's not going to happen tonight. But we have the military band playing. The cannons are firing off. The plane, Air Force One, just behind him as he sets to take the stage. And just like he did during his campaigns, George, when he had his own private plane behind him, now Air Force One. The final moments, the final hours of the Trump presidency right in front of our eyes as he's greeting supporters. Just steps from taking that podium. And again, moments away from ending this presidency, George.
That's right. Tight smile there from the president, approaching the podium for the last time as president.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we love you, and I can tell you that from the bottom of my heart. This has been an incredible 4 years. We've accomplished so much together. I want to thank all of my family and my friends and my staff and so many other people for being here. I want to thank you for your effort, your hard work. People have no idea how hard this family worked. They worked, and they worked for you. They could have had a much easier life, but they did a fantastic job. I just want to thank all of you, everyone. I want to thank Mark Meadows, who's here, someplace right there. I want to thank Mark. But it's been something very special. We've accomplished a lot. Our First Lady has been a woman of great grace and beauty and dignity. And so popular with the people, so popular with the people. In fact, honey, would you like to say a few words, please?
Being your First Lady was my greatest honor. Thank you for your love and your support. You will be in my thoughts and prayers. God bless you all. God bless your families. And God bless this beautiful nation. Thank you.
What else has to be said, right? But what we've done, that's true, honey, great job. What we've done has been amazing by any standard. We rebuilt the United States military. We created a new force called Space Force. That in itself would be a major achievement for a regular administration. We were not a regular administration. We took care of the vets, 91% approval rating. They've never had that before. The vets have given us, the VA, the vets have given us an approval rating like has never been before. We took care of our vets and our beautiful vets. They were very badly treated before we came along. And as you know, we get them great service, and we pick up the bill, and they can go out and they can see a doctor if they have to wait long periods of time. We got it so that we can sadly get rid of people that don't treat our vets properly. We didn't have any of those rights before when I came on, so our vets are happy, our people are happy, our military is thrilled. We also got tax cuts, the largest tax cut and reform in the history of our country by far. I hope they don't raise your taxes, but if they do, I told you so. And if you look at the regulations, which I consider the regulation cuts to be maybe even more important, that's why we have such good and have had such good job numbers. The job numbers have been absolutely incredible. When we started, had we not been hit by the pandemic, we would have had numbers that would never have been seen. Already our numbers are the best ever. If you look at what happened until February a year ago, our numbers were at a level that nobody had ever seen before. And even now, we really built it twice. We got hit. Nobody blames us for that. The whole world got hit, and then we built it again. And now the stock market is actually substantially higher than it was at its higher point prior to the pandemic. So it's really, you could say we built it twice. And you're going to see incredible numbers start coming in if everything is sort of left alone. Be careful. Very complex. Be careful. But you're going to see some incredible things happening. And remember us when you see these things happening, if you would. Remember us, because I'm looking at elements of our economy that are set to be a rocket ship up. It's a rocket ship up. We have the greatest country in the world. We have the greatest economy in the world. And as bad as the pandemic was, we were hit so hard, just like the entire world was hit so hard. Places that thought they got away with it didn't get away with it. They're suffering right now. We did something that is really considered a medical miracle. They're calling it a miracle, and that was the vaccine. We got the vaccine developed in 9 months instead of 9 years or 5 years or 10 years or a long time. It was supposed to take a long time, many, many years to develop a vaccine. We have 2 out. We have another one coming almost immediately. And it really is a great achievement. So you should start to see really good numbers over the next few months. I think you're going to see those numbers really skyrocket downward. And I can only say this, we have worked hard. We've left it all, as the athletes would say, we've left it all in the field. We don't have to come and say, we'll never say in a month when we're sitting in Florida, we're not going to be looking at each other and saying, you know, if we only worked a little bit harder, you can't work harder. And we had a lot of obstacles, and we went through the obstacles. And we just got 75 million votes, and that's a record in the history of sitting presidents. That's an all-time record by a lot, by many millions in the history of sitting presidents. It's been really just an honor. One of the things we're very, very proud of is the selection of almost 300 federal judges and 3 great Supreme Court justices. That's a very big number. That's a record-setting number. And so we've done a lot, and there's still things to do. The first thing we have to do is pay our respects and our love to the incredible people and families who suffered so gravely from the China virus. It's a horrible thing that was put onto the world. We all know where it came from, but it's a horrible, horrible thing. So be very careful. Be very, very careful. But we want to pay great love to all of the people that have suffered, including families who have suffered so gravely. So with that, I just want to say you are amazing people. This is a great, great country. It is my greatest honor and privilege to have been your president. always fight for you. I will be watching, I will be listening, and I will tell you that the future of this country has never been better. I wish the new administration great luck and great success. I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular. And again, we put it in a position like it's never been before, despite the worst plague to hit since, I guess you'd say 1917, over 100 years ago. And despite that, the things that we've done have been just incredible, and I couldn't have done it without you. So just a goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form. And again, I want to just, in leaving, I want to thank our Vice President, Mike Pence, and Karen. I want to thank Congress, because we really worked well with Congress, at least certain elements of Congress. But we really did. We've gotten so much done that nobody thought would be possible. But I do want to thank Congress. And I want to thank all of the great people of Washington, D.C., all of the people that we worked with to put this miracle together. So have a good life. We will see you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Have a good life. What a way to finish a speech for the President of the United States, his final speech as president. In some ways, a familiar speech from President Trump, talking about his view of his accomplishments. Some familiar exaggerations and falsehoods there, talking about his record and the number of votes he won, but also a couple of great notes. He wished best of luck to the new administration. John Carl, as I said, a familiar speech. He seemed to have two scripts there, one that was written for him and one he decided to give himself.
It was vintage Donald Trump, filled with grievance, complaints about the ways in which he has been wrong, the obstacles that he has faced, exaggerations on his accomplishments. There was a script, George. It was a script that was to start out with grace notes and well wishes for Joe Biden and for Kamala Harris. Actually, the script that was written, and I assume was in that teleprompter, included the names Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He didn't actually say their names in that speech, but he did get around to wishing them good luck. He also, in the script that he was, the plan here, he was going to say nice things about his vice president. He did seem to remember that he should mention his vice president, and in the end just got a thank you for Mike Pence and Karen Pence, of course, a vice president that he broke with in just unimaginable ways here in the final weeks of his presidency.
I want to bring in Rebecca Jarvis. The president spoke a lot about the economy right there and what he sees as his accomplishments. Also had a bit of a warning, said I could come back and say I told you so if they he said they raise your taxes. Rebecca, give us a bit of a reality check on the economy.
Certainly. Well, and President Trump also gave warnings that if Joe Biden was elected president, that the U.S. stock market would crater. He recognized in that speech that as he leaves office today, the U.S. stock market is near record highs. But when this president took office, the unemployment rate in this country was 4.8%. Today, it is 6.7%. There are 10.7 million Americans currently unemployed. That's 3 million more officially than when he took office. And it is an economy, this economy that President-elect Joe Biden inherits, is going to be a challenge, a significant one. In fact, he will have to create more jobs as president of this country than any other president in recent history if he's to bring things back to a normal place and create full employment in this country. And that is going to be a significant task. Taxes certainly part of this question, but so will that stimulus. For many, many months, lawmakers called on the president, on Congress, to come up with a stimulus plan to help the millions of Americans who are collecting unemployment benefits, who are late on their mortgage payments. And that was not done. It was wasted, time wasted. And we saw that reflected in the final unemployment report of last year, George, where for the first time in many months after job creation, we saw job losses again. 140,000 Americans lost their jobs in the month of December. Many of those workers in the leisure and hospitality space, restaurant workers, airline workers, those jobs with the pandemic still raging are still jobs that are uncertain going forward.
And we just saw that door close to the president's cabin on Air Force One. Final wave, final walk up the steps, as we see. And how fitting is this? President-elect Joe Biden, his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, leaving Blair House. That is a tradition that has been kept. He stayed in Blair House overnight with his family, the traditional guest house across the street.